Welcome to Season 3 of Malevolent Autopsy. I'm your host, Queen. I use she, her pronouns, and I am so excited to be here with you all. Now, let me warn you, the show contains major spoilers for everything in Malevolent as of the day this episode is published, so if you're not caught up, I'm not liable. Before we get started tonight, I'd like to ask my lovely co-host, what part of Arthur's body are you betting on getting injured this week?
Howdy, hello. My name is Vol Control. I use he, him pronouns, and I've been out of the betting pool for what feels like an age, but this week I'm betting on Arthur's hamstrings getting injured from hiking up that chain.
That's fair. That's fair. Mine would be too, though, in all seriousness.
Yeah.
I could not do that shit.
And this week's chapter was a doozy of an episode. It was 17 minutes. Only fitting for a doozy of a vote. We start with Arthur deciding to remove his mask. They can always put it back on, John says, in a rare case of voter speculation being confirmed. And then they're off to the races with a moving pillar maze puzzle to solve. The only way forward is through, and luckily without the mask's limited vision to impede us, we make it through unscathed. And reach an epic vista. A sheer cliff face that looks out onto an endless frozen ocean as far as the eye can see. And tethered to the beach by massive anchors and chains, a great crab city. Crabevolent is finally realized. But first, Arthur and John have to get down from the cliff. Lucky for them, the Dark World Tourism Board provided a handy staircase of the dead. I'm not sure if it's ADA compliant, but Arthur manages all right. As they descend, John contemplates not giving up, but enjoying some of their last moments together. Arthur protests that he can't stop, and John pushes with a hypothetical. What if it was Thoreau? Is that what the manager meant when he said they would need to let go? Is the Dark World guiding them, showing them the way to defeat Cain? They resolve that the only thing to do is pursue the bell, but Arthur has to stop and ask John, do you think she is here?
I love that. Such a good chapter.
Yeah, it was really cool. There were so many cool things that happened, and it was so atmospheric of the Dark World, and I love all of the new little things and guys that we get to see in each of the chapters in this part. Like the description of the first of all, the sound of the moving pillars was so cool, but the description that they're like little like crab legs underneath them moving them around, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I loved when he said spider-like legs, and a chill ran straight down my spine. And I think specifically the legs are the worst part of the spider. And I think it's part of why I actually really don't like looking at sea creatures most of the time. Like, yeah. They kind of give me the same ick as insects do and like spiders, because just crabs are really not that far off from spiders. And so sometimes if I look at a crab for too long, I get really freaked out.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There are a lot of like super freaky guys in the ocean that I do not care for. But it was really funny because there were so many of these like references to like crabs and the ocean and the horseshoe crab trilobite, and one of our local super fans, Fisher, is a huge fan of obviously fish and the ocean, and we were all laughing that this chapter was specifically written for him.
Yes, we are all, I think a lot of us were thinking about fish with this chapter. And if you've been listening to Autopsy for a long time, you will know Fish. He came on a lot back in season like 1 and 2-ish for like lore-based episodes and to info dump about like Lovecraft stuff. And he's a very smart and funny and cool guy.
Yeah.
And he's around the server all the time, and he's the best.
And he's in chat right now. Hi, Fish.
Hi, Fish. Okay, Vol, I could talk for a million years about this episode, but I actually could talk for even longer about the poll. So, what was your carrot this episode?
My carrot, there were a lot of little moments, but I gotta say, the fucking city, it was cool enough that it was this like huge eldritch monster that looked like a horseshoe crab, but when he described that it looked like it was a city, I lost my fucking mind, to say nothing of the music, the chanting, John's description.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I thought that was so
Yeah.
fucking rad.
Yeah. Super fucking cool. I mean, I'm all the ways down for a good jonologue, but
Yes.
I really extra loved the visuals of this chapter. I
Yes.
think this has been some of the most stunning since chapter one, and John describing the dark world for the first time. I loved
Yeah.
it. It was beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually thought that the vote this week was going to be whether or not we go up to the city or we go over to the field. I was a little confused about, like, geographically where those locations were, but I was ready to go fucking hard to go to the city. But then again, I feel like if the question had been the city versus the field, okay, people would have wanted to go to the field so that John and Arthur could have a moment. But on the other hand, it would have been like a 90% towards the city, 10% towards the field.
You know what? That should be a new segment because Malevolent has so many places you could put votes.
Yeah.
And it's not until you're a voter that you really understand like what those votes are going to be and how to figure them out. And sometimes they still throw you for a loop, but you could really make up votes for these chapters. There have been so many times where I'm like, oh, I bet this is what the vote's going to be. And I'll look at the timestamp and it's not even halfway over. And I'm like,
Right.
oh my God, that's not the vote. Yeah.
Shout out to a bird in the chat that says the writing this season has been off the chain, if you will. Very good. Very good.
Oh my God. Okay. Speaking of terrible jokes, what is your stick?
I guess my stick for this episode was Arthur not wanting to like make time for them to enjoy each other's company before it's all over and like not having a moment to rest.
I just felt your lower lip tremble.
But but when I was thinking about this while I was writing my notes, I wrote down, I need a Dark World train or elevator moment. We need the whimsical music, the whimsical tune.
If we have to go all of season 6 never hearing my silly, whimsical, beautiful, adorable music that plays when they're having a good old time and being silly boys, I will be sad. I won't be, like, devastated, but I will be sad. I'll understand, I know, the season is, like, Harlan's last hurrah with Malevolent as it is in this iteration, and it's got to be serious, and there's a story and all that crap, but I'll be sad.
I am so
team.
certain. I am so certain that Harlan is going to throw in a little whimsical tune moment. I feel certain, because no matter how dire or serious the theme of the season or the parts,
No matter how straight the gate.
there's always some little like moment for levity, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, a lot of people have been speculating that we might get Yorick in the Dark World, and, or, you know, whatever passes for Yorick right now. And maybe, I mean, that would be my first thought, is if we're going to get a whimsical tune and they're not in a good mood enough to give it to us, it'll be somebody like Yorick.
Yeah. So, Queen, what was your carrot for this chapter?
My carrot can be boiled down to a quote, which is just the exchange, "Don't say it, but it is."
Yes, that was
Because
so good.
I'm sorry, that was so fucking good. I think one of my favorite exchanges between John and Arthur are times where one of them says something, specifically I think it's Arthur, says something that I legit dead ass would say or have said in a similar vibe situation.
Right.
I am totally the kind of person who's walking around my room looking for something, and as I'm doing it, I'm talking to myself and I'm like, do not tell me I left it at home. Do not tell me that. Oh my God, I can't. And so, like, to hear Arthur say what I was thinking, which is like, John, I swear to God, do not say it. And then he did. And for John's tone delivery was perfect in that I'm acting like they're other people and it's not just Harlan. I was just about to say, John delivered that line so well. But like the line delivery was so good, and
Yeah.
to think that they're not always, I mean, from what we know of how Malevolent is recorded, he films them on two separate tracks, and so that means he says all of Arthur's lines and then all of John's lines all separately, and so not actually having this conversation in real time, even though I do think that he might be able to get away with doing that sometimes because I've heard him
Sure.
on Spooky Stream doing it.
Yeah.
So like he could totally do it, but I bet audio editing wise, especially with music cues and stuff, it's probably easier to still keep them completely separate. But
Yeah.
still, when I think about that kind of thing, and I have to remember that when I'm going back over the chapters, it's like, oh my God, he was able to deliver it in the perfect tone and cadence and with the snappy rhythm of a real conversation
Yeah.
despite not actually having one. And that just takes such a skilled performer. I was just, it's so
Yeah.
impressive. And so, on top of the technical details, I was also just like so tickled by the very relatable hashtag relatable British boy line that was
Well,
given. I loved it.
this also reminds me of how Arthur later in the episode says, you're trying to figure out the latest cryptic bullshit in a long line of cryptic bullshit. And I was like, oh,
Yes,
Arthur, go off. Go off, buddy.
I loved that. I loved that. I think that was like runner up for the quote that I was going to choose as
Yeah.
my carrot because
Yeah.
Arthur has so many good lines. I know there's so many John Stance, Luna Maria in the chat, but like Arthur has so many good lines and so
Yeah.
much good. I think a lot of his lines, the really what makes them is the tone and cadence of his delivery in them. And so I really appreciate how much Harlan can get across in just inflection and delivery, and he doesn't need to have a constantly flowery vocabulary for every character moment. I think
Yeah.
it's really cool.
Yeah, it is really impressive how much he communicates through emotion and delivery. So, what was your stick this week?
My stick is I just we keep getting these moments between Arthur and John ever since 52 where I kind of wish that things were back to divorce levels,
Sure.
because in divorces they're angry and they're mean and they're like scalding and it's almost juicy. It's almost like, ooh, that was a low blow, and and it's like kind of
You get something
exhilarating
out
and
of it.
adrenaline inducing. Yeah. But these exchanges have increasingly felt more and more like, I don't want to even say depressing, but they've just felt more horrible and like
Hopeless in a way.
fragile and
Yeah.
vulnerable in a way that is just painful. And it's very good. It's a good kind of like, it's a story beat that you need, and it's
Yeah.
development and depth that I think we've all been enjoying and like appreciated. But it hurts, and like
Yeah.
this is not even halfway into the fucking season, and we're having so many of these like really hard exchanges. And for me specifically, I think hearing them misunderstand each other over and over again, and John's flipping the script with Arthur back and forth, and how many times they've really had to like take turns in this season doing the things that they were doing for each other, a long time ago. It's just kind of feels very full circle in the very final way that the final season of a thing is going to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
And I think that's also contributing to how I feel about it, because it just, knowing this is the last season and knowing this is like the end of their story, or what's supposed to be, it all kind of carries an even heavier weight. Maybe that is part of what changes these interactions for me, is the context of them, rather than, back in season 2, I knew every fight they were having was escalating to something. But
Yeah.
this just, that there's not that much left to escalate to, and with the timer running out, where do you go, and how are they going to fix it, and are they going to fix it? And it
Yeah.
sends goosebumps down my arms to think about it.
Well, and I mean, we are in the darkest night of the soul, the season. Like this whole season, it's in the dark world. It doesn't get more on the nose than that. But yeah, it definitely feels like we are very much in that darkest night of the soul part of the story, and it's interesting to have to sit in that for longer.
As a professional writer, can you explain what you mean when you say the darkest night of the soul, my friend?
So, The Darkest Night of the Soul is usually the story beat where you lose all hope. And it looks like, how are our guys going to get out of this one? And essentially, The Darkest Night of the Soul is that moment of hopelessness where it seems like all hope is lost, like there's no coming back from this. It's a test of the character's will to continue to go on and whether they will get back on their feet and fight the final battle, basically.
Yeah, and I think if you are listening and you want a good kind of way to understand it, just taking a look at the hero's journey diagram
Yeah.
is a really good start. That kind of gives you a really good idea of what we're talking about, because the closer you get to the end of a story, you have different labels for different parts of the story, and you can definitely categorize Malevolent in those. And every season has its own hill, but those hills also have hills, so it gets very intricate and deep. It's a very useful tool, and I think it really helps to think about Malevolent in that way too, especially as we start talking about like the end of the season.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, that was my carrot. Before we like move completely on, there was something that I wanted to take note of. Shout out to Mizra and Faye, specifically Faye, for doing transcripts for the exclusive Malevolent commentaries. There are right now posted like 17 parts of the transcripts. So it's basically Harlan playing the episode, and then he talks while the episode plays, and he gives you like insight and talks about all kinds of stuff. I mean, everything from his personal stories to insight behind what he was thinking when he wrote this, or like what was happening in his life at the time, or like the votes or the patron culture. It's kind of like Autopsy, really. It's kind of like Autopsy, but better because it's coming from Harlan. But when we were talking about the vote, I wanted to bring up the context of Harlan's perspective on this episode of Malevolent from season 2. This is a pretty early perspective, and this commentary was recorded quite a long time ago. So I'm not saying that it's set in stone, but it is kind of something that got stuck in my brain, and I think it's really useful to consider too. When Arthur says, "I get you're trying to figure out the latest cryptic bullshit in a long, endless line of cryptic bullshit," and then goes on to basically say, "But shut the fuck up, John."
Right. Yeah.
I mean, my gut was punched. That initial reaction, I think, was really hard for a lot of people because Arthur just sounds like a dick. Like, fully, like, I am so pro Arthur, but he just sounded like such an asshole in this chapter. And every step of the way, you can feel that, even I could feel that, like, dude, chill.
Right.
Dude, chill. And I know that it can be really easy to kind of have blinders on, and as a reader sitting here and not in that fictional world with that as that fictional character, you can be like, dude, chill out. John loves you, and he's trying to express that love, and you need to be open to it. But I'm going to read you this part 14 part of the commentary. This really changed how I felt after I listened to it a very long time ago. It's the storm, when John and Arthur are in the Dreamlands, and Harlan is giving commentary, is basically floating around how people have come to see John and Arthur in the space that he's working in, because he sees all of the fan reactions to stuff, and he, as any creator would, is looking for how people are responding to the characters.
Yeah.
I'm just going to read an excerpt because I really want you to pay for this content. It's really good content, and it's fully worth it, and you can pay for it for a month and binge the whole thing and never have to pay again if you really don't want to, but I think it's super worth it. So he says, let's see, he'd be the player character I'd be playing in the game. So when these interactions come, I argue them pretty evenly, but it's always Arthur doing all the work. He's the Sisyphus or whatever. He's the one pushing the rock and moving the body and being tired and thirsty. And John, people give him the same weight as Arthur in terms of responsibility. And they're like, but he's got a great point. And I'm like, yeah, but Arthur's the one that hasn't fucking slept and hasn't eaten and probably has a headache and all the physical things that I don't really want to express too much, because then people are like, hey, you said that Arthur's head hurt here. Why isn't it hurting there? It's like, okay, well, look, what I'm saying is There are things that Arthur's experiencing and taking the brunt, and obviously John misses out on, but obviously that means all the negative human side effects are also coming with him. So yeah, a lot of the arguments might be even, but I always side with Arthur because he's the actual one that has to fucking get stabbed and actually navigate this thing and make the decision because he's physically having to run. Then he goes on to talk about like the witch scene and how he's talking about like Arthur bashes her brains in. Not the witch, but the hag under the mountain. When Arthur bashes her brains in, of course it's a terrible decision, but you also have to imagine you're squeezing through this passage and you're out of breath and you're sweaty and you're clamoring for a rock and your fingernails are bleeding. And he's describing all this awful stuff that Arthur's physically going through. And then he says, and here's this voice in your head that's reclined in a chair just being like, hey, that wasn't a very nice thing. Like the audacity of John sometimes to be pointing out something that, sure, maybe he's right, but fucking come on, weigh it evenly, dude. So that's why I always tend to side with Arthur.
Yeah.
And then he proceeds, and I won't read this verbatim either, but he proceeds to give a really good example of like a child that's strapped to your back for a hike, and you're hiking for a really long time and it's hot and stuffy, and you know you're the one who volunteered to take them on this hike, but you stop to rest for a second and you're like, oh, I'm so thirsty. But then you go to take your sip of your water and your kid's like, hey, I want a drink, I'm thirsty. And you're like, dude, like
you've been
your
sitting there.
and...
You've been just sitting there the whole time.
Right, exactly. And so when I talk about how Arthur and John have it and the balance between them and how some people tend to be like an Arthur stan or a John stan, because I tease Luna Maria, but Luna and I both love John and Arthur pretty equal about. I feel strongly that, you know, I mean, I have different opinions when it comes to like who's your main favorite character. I always say it's kind of hard for me to justify having a main favorite character, but if I mean, gun to my head, I would pick Arthur. But like, I don't necessarily think that it comes down to like you always think Arthur's right or you always think John's right. But I do think it's important for people to remember, especially when Arthur's being a dick, that he's going through a lot of physical trauma that Arthur that John does not have to carry. And in this chapter, for me, that was kind of something that helped me forgive Arthur very quickly in a way that I think John still really struggles to, because he doesn't have any way to like fix that. Like, how is he supposed to balance that out? He's still just kind of sitting there.
I was actually on Arthur's side in this episode, because I don't know, like, as much as the fan in me wants to have John expressed that he wants to spend quality time with Arthur and that he wants to like take a break and give that to Arthur, like encourage him to take a moment to rest and to enjoy the time they have together. On the other hand, I'm like, that's fucking rich coming from you, John. Yeah, you want to just fucking rest? Like, we got shit to do. And not only that, but then when John mentions Thoreau, I'm like, what? What the fuck, John? Like, this feels manipulative as fuck. Like, why would you make Arthur...
did not, hey, I will ask you this later again. You did not originally feel that it was manipulative.
What?
You didn't originally say that you felt it was manipulative that he brought up Thoreau.
I didn't say that, but I felt it.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
Listen, look, I watched Ball go through an
true.
evolution and flip his fucking opinion, and it drove me nuts.
And
I haven't been able to talk about it. Let's talk about the vote.
Let's talk about the vote.
Because I think it will burst out of me if we don't talk about it. Okay, so for this chapter, the vote was, yes, I think she's here versus no, I don't think she's here. And right now, the vote is at 362 votes total, with 30% yes and 70% no. Vol, what are you voting for?
I currently have my vote on yes, I think she's here. But I don't feel super strongly about that.
Okay. And I currently have my vote on no, I don't think she's here, and I feel incredibly strongly about that. Maybe the strongest I felt in a long time about a vote, actually.
Well, I think this is one of those votes that was like extremely emotional for a lot of people, and I know that a lot of people didn't want to think about baby being in super hell and thought that that was a terrible fate for Faro, but also a terrible thing to put in Arthur's head. And I agree, and I think I'm flipping back again because I just there were some interesting arguments about whether it was better to be honest, and the fact is that everything ends up in the dark world, and so if there's an exception to that, how does that work? There's some interesting submissions that we'll listen to that talk about some of that.
Okay, I will start with the first one then.
Hi, Autopsy. Rose has been her, and oh man, what a chapter. I'm gonna go back to my roots here and talk about the music because I'm sure others will have much more poignant things to say regarding the vote. I'm a no voter and we'll leave it at that. The first thing that caught my attention was the chanting. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the time to dissect it right now, but I will say that the way the voices are stacked is fantastically dissonant, and it's paired with a low octave drone that changes with the piano chords. It's amazing how the music and dialogue script themselves together and become intertwined. And I mentioned Gregorian chant in the live chat. It's not really Gregorian chant. Again, when I have time to sit down and dissect it, I will. The soundtracks this season have been incredibly impactful, and I can't wait to go over them again with a fine-tooth comb, but what caught my attention was the use of How Far We've Come, which some of us know is one of my favorite soundtracks. It's the first one that I sat down and really dissected. Perhaps we should spend our last days living is what cues it, and it's the lonely piano line, no cello, which is fascinating considering it's John proposing this to Arthur. Arthur, on the other hand, is locked the fuck in, so much so he's not taking John's words to heart because he needs something to keep going. Something that is more impersonal. He's looking for a goal, looking for an answer. The music resolves when Arthur says, "I won't," which is another fascinating thing considering how often this soundtrack goes unfinished, unresolved. And then John brings up Furrow, which is, of course, a punch to the gut as it always is. The complete lack of music, just whistling wind on the background, is fascinating. It happens again at the end of the chapter when Arthur says, "If we are throwing around hypotheticals, do you think she's here?" Especially considering we have heard a Furrow's theme in previous chapters, and the empty background speaks for itself, building that tension. The last thing I want to mention is Meth It Out Yourself for a while. All it's doing is distracting me from keeping us alive. And you know who that reminds me of? Season 3 Arthur, which I have many thoughts and feelings about, and when I have time, I will be writing essays.
Thank you for your submission, Rose. God, I love all of your thoughts.
Yeah, and I thought the comment about how it sounded like season 3 Arthur is kind of sort of what we were talking about when we were discussing that line. But yeah, I love all of the like details about the music and when it comes in and how it stops. That's so good.
Yeah, I agree. I also love that you touched on how, like, you know what? I'm going to save that. Shall we go on to the next one?
Let's do.
Hello, this is AK Trash Panda, she, her pronouns, here with big feelings about John Doe. We should spend our last days living? Are you kidding me? John just reached his actual end. He just wrapped up his life and lowered himself into the ground and made peace with the fact that it's over. He's always been a realist, and to him, they lost, but they have an opportunity to have some peace before the true end of all things. And for a being who has never once in his existence known true peace, that's not an opportunity he can just let go. And then to invoke Arthur's deepest and truest relationship, asking if things would be different for her, to convey the depth of his feeling for Arthur. John has only ever wanted to mean as much to Arthur as Arthur means to him. All he wants is a moment of rest, and to know that he's loved. What could possibly be more human than that? Y'all, this is solitude. What John wants is solitude. He's asking for the warmth of compassion, for rest, and for simple love, and I'm not even a little bit okay with it at all.
AK has a 2-part submission, but I am really glad this got split up because, like, I just want to express how hard it is for me not to interrupt these fucking submissions. Thank you so much for your submission, AK. I'm going to say it again after the second part, but man, I love how much emotion and love you guys have poured into the chapter and how much feeling you see in the characters, because it makes me feel like a monster for not seeing any of that shit. I have to say, everyone's like, he just wants solitude and compassion and a moment. And I'm like, sure, maybe. Look, I don't know.
No,
it
took me out when AK said that John wants to mean as much to Arthur as Arthur means to him. Oh my god.
I don't know, guys. I just maybe I'm become a callous bastard because of Malevolent, but like when he brought out Faroe, I really didn't think it was because he was trying to say, like, I wish I could hug you with my human body. And because I can't, I'm going to tell you about Faroe hugging you and her childish little hands grabbing your hand like I would like. Like, I didn't hear any of that. And so for all these beautiful interpretations of the same script to come out was just so creative and passionate and beautiful. And it made me really appreciate how many different readings you can take of the exact same thing.
Yeah. So those were the voice submissions that have to do with the chapter. Now we can get into the ones that have to do with the vote.
Okay. All right. Let's hear the rest of AK's lovely message.
Fuck. Okay, there's a vote. Okay. I really see no good outcome in telling Arthur that Faroe could be here. Best case scenario, if Arthur's given even the slightest indication that Faroe could be here, is he proves John immediately right by dropping everything to go find her, by rightly trying to go spend his last moments with her. He completely abandoned everything in part 19 after being given the smallest hope that she was there. He will follow that lure every time. Worst case scenario, he implodes in on himself, racked with grief and self-hatred at the possibility that his daughter is in this place of wrath and fear because he failed her. Neither scenario is particularly good for Arthur's mental health or keeping focus on the mission at hand. I don't think she's here, but that's a moot point. The vote is about what's most in keeping with John's character to say in this moment and what would be most helpful for Arthur to hear. And John doesn't know if she's here. We've been listening to him trip over himself trying to tell Arthur something important about his time here in the Dark World, and if he had any information about Faroe, I really think he would have taken that opportunity Arthur presented by asking him outright to tell him immediately if he had any information. He would jump at any chance to finally talk about what he's been trying to get out all this time. Instead, he vehemently promises that he never saw her when he was here before. John is dying to talk about what he knows. This isn't something he knows. And John's been saying he doesn't think she's here. In keeping with his character, he said it about the Dark World and he said it about the Dreamlands, and I think it would be a weird reversal for him to now be like, yeah, totally, I definitely think she's here. Not even she could be here. The vote wording is very clearly she is or she isn't. I can't see John ever telling Arthur he believes she definitely is here without a shred of proof. And even if he does think she could be here, even if him telling Arthur he doesn't think she's here is technically a lie, he's lied to help Arthur in the past. He lied all through New York to get him where he needed to go. He lied about what was in Oscar's letter to give him hope. Arthur's exact words in part 32 when John asked him about lying for good to help was to tell him, I suppose in that case it's about what's at stake. This feels like there's a lot at stake. We gotta keep this man who's at his frayed rope's end together for just a little longer. Him thinking his daughter is here is not gonna help that. She shouldn't be here, and he doesn't want that. If the real question is, does offering hope help, or will it only lead to pain, then the answer can only be no. This is not real hope. This is only pain, and it goes against every theme in this Hope Horror podcast.
I love you, AK. Thank you so much for your submission.
And actually, I think it was listening to AK's points, which were laid out really, really well, and reminded me that John has said multiple times that Faroe is not in the Dark World, or he doesn't think she is in the Dark World. And so I agree, it would be weird if suddenly he decided, oh, no, you know what, I was lying to you all those times. And I also like the point that AK makes about if John is lying, he's doing it for quote-unquote the right reasons.
I mean, okay, when you say, oh, it would be weird if John said yes now, I have to tell you, I fully agree with you, but I also talked with an amazing person that I don't see in chat. I think they go by Lay on Discord. I'm sure you saw me talking to them a bunch if you scrolled through the poll chat, Vol. They had
You
some
sound
great...
like I don't scroll through poll chat.
I know, I meant that genuinely. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that sarcastically. That was genuine. I'm sure you saw my giant paragraphs.
Yes.
Me and Lay were going back and forth about this, and you see us doing a little bit on Patreon comments before I realized they were also cross-posting to Discord, and we just talked there. They said that it would be weird for John to say no because he brought up Faroe, and since he's the one who brought up Faroe, it would be weird if he then said, no, but I don't think she's here. I just brought her up for no reason.
Yeah.
And I can totally understand that logic, despite the fact that I deeply, deeply disagree with it.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting the way you can definitely make an argument that it would be weird if John said yes, and it would be weird if John said no. So
yeah, and Lay's arguments in Slow Poll on the Discord server were the thing that flipped me. So they had laid out
I know.
so many good... I took some notes on it, a short version. So Lay made a very convincing argument in Slow Poll that if John says no, then why bring up Faroe in the first place, like you were saying. Was it not emotionally manipulative to bring her into this as a hypothetical? And this is a quote from them. Letting Arthur talk this through would naturally lead to a back and forth with John. During that, the idea that alternate versions of Faro could exist in the Dark World or elsewhere would almost definitely come up. And suddenly, just like that, there's a tangible goal/reward for all of this. It directly answers what John asked in the last chapter. Why not enjoy these last few days? Because alternate versions of my daughter might still exist, might be spared if we succeed, and if anything, that gives me more reason to keep going. It gives this hopeless mission a tangible, personal stake. What better way for Arthur to finally let go of his failure with Faro than by saving an infinite other versions of his daughter? It's easier to convince yourself to save one person rather than the whole world. Luckily for us, trying to save this person will also mean saving the world. Which is interesting, but speculative.
Yes, and in response to Leia, I basically, which, like, if you're in chat right now and you have the ability, go search poll chat and look at our conversation. If you just search Leia's name in the channel poll chat only, you'll see our conversation. I think it's really good.
That's spelled L-E-Y.
Yes, L-E-Y. I basically have been saying this whole time, John didn't bring up Faro to emotionally manipulate Arthur. And I know that manipulation is not always a bad thing. It is something that you use, like, in persuasive essays.
Right,
like,
yeah.
It is just a thing. It's not necessarily a negative thing.
Right.
But I don't believe that John, like, pulled Faro out of his pocket to do something with her like a weapon. Like, I don't think that was the intention. What I saw it as, what my immediate first read of it was, and that's why I was so shocked to see how many people were behind the other side of this. What I saw it was as, like, John said over and over in the chapter text that Arthur wasn't understanding him, and he was trying to clarify himself in multiple different ways. And he even preemptively said, I'm not being a defeatist. I'm not saying we should give up. I'm like, he's trying so hard to explain this concept to Arthur, and Arthur's not getting it. He's pushing through something else, and he's not focused on what John's really meaning. And whether or not Arthur should have gotten it, he doesn't get it, okay? And so John then resorts to using a hypothetical example that he knows Arthur will connect with to finally try and break through whatever barrier Arthur is struggling to get through on his own. And so John uses something that is deeply emotionally connected to Arthur, the way that he's trying to get across to him, basically saying, you cannot live for the ending. You can't just say, I'm going to slow down and enjoy this once I fix it. You have to find a reason that the now is worth staying in. And if you blindly push forward and you're miserable the whole time and you're like, yeah, nose to the grindstone, you have to survive. But you also can't afford to hate every second of survival because, you know, you also have to understand that this is the life. Like, this surviving is the life that you are leading. And so, you know, the better future that you're working toward, you have to keep it in mind. And, like, yes, that can be your sole focus even, but, like, you need to appreciate the temporary and the ephemeral and the now. And I think John was really struggling to articulate that in a position where he does not have the physical body that Arthur is dealing with, and he's not in charge of anything right now. He doesn't do anything but sit there and tell Arthur what's going on. And Arthur's making the choices. Arthur's making the decisions. He's pushing through all this. And so John's trying to convey a really philosophical almost and, like, high intellectual emotional concept to Arthur, who's not working on that operational ground right now. And he was trying to show Arthur by bringing up Faro as a connection that he could see. And no, he could not have used Bella, and he could not have used Parker.
I think you're giving John too much credit here, but I can see your perspective, yeah.
I was just going to finish by saying, basically, I don't think that John was saying, I wish that I think that you would do this for Faro, but you won't do this for me. I don't think that John
really
was
don't
saying,
think that's what he's saying?
I really don't think that was what he was saying.
I'm torn in two directions with that, because on the one hand, I do think that John was trying to, like, drop a bombshell to, like, get Arthur's attention. But on the other hand, I also did feel like there was almost this feeling of jealousy where it's like, at the end of the world, you won't stop for a moment with me, but would you do it for Ro? Which is a totally unfair comparison.
Maybe I'm wrong, but no, I straight up do not think that was at all what John meant. And like, I'm not, and I don't, and this is from somebody who is fully on Arthur's side, like, almost 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. I just don't think that I think John respects Faro too much for that. Yeah. I genuinely don't think he's still capable of doing that to Arthur.
Right.
I think he's changed too much.
I want to believe that's true. But also John has shocked us at times where, when backed into a corner, he falls back on his old ways.
And I don't think he's backed into a corner right now. What the fuck does he have to gain from doing that? What, like, genuinely, and this is something that I asked Leia too, what the fuck is John trying to win by doing this? He's not trying to get them to do anything. He's
trying to get them to not do something. That's specifically his point. Is he's trying to get Arthur he's trying to get Arthur to slow down and take a moment.
What does that mean?
What do you mean? What does that mean? It's what John said that he wanted. What
action does John want Arthur to take right now?
He wants to spend quality time with him, whatever that means.
That's not, yeah, but see, this is what I mean. John is talking about a nebulous concept. He's not telling Arthur to stop climbing up to the bell or like to sit down and have a chat with him. He's not even like making a request here.
I think that's what he wanted, though.
I see. That's the problem. We're all trying to interpret what John wants.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think that, and that's where I come to an issue with everybody so definitively saying that John is like jealous of Faro, or that he's like mad at Arthur for not loving him more or something. I don't feel like...
Yeah, I think that extrapolating that he's jealous of Faro that's an interpretation, but I do have to argue that John is asking for something. John is asking for Arthur to spend a few moments with him, or however long. He's asking him if he would be willing to spend time with him. That is literally like the main crux of this conversation that they have. I think this conversation goes on so long that we lose track of what the fuck it started in. He's talks about the coffins. He talks about, they hear the bell, and then that's when Arthur reacts like John stabbed him, and he's like, they hear the bell, and John says, but it came from above, it came from that city, and Arthur says, Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. And John, in that moment, that's when the conversation begins. Arthur says, what are we supposed to do? And what I think John is hearing is Arthur doesn't want to do this. He's dreading this. He's upset. He doesn't want to do this. And what John is trying to remind him is there's no set path. We don't actually know that this bell is for us. We have no reason to believe that this is like we're doing the right thing. And Arthur, you can do whatever you want, and you don't have to follow this bell. You don't have to do this. And what Arthur hears is you should give up. Mm-hmm. And that is immediately John start trying to explain to him, I'm not saying we should give up. I'm telling you that you have full agency and control, and like you get to decide how this path is forged. You get to decide what to do next. And Arthur just isn't hearing it. And that's when John brings up the fact that, like, because Arthur keeps implying that he wants to give up, John's saying, I don't want to give up. I just, like, you need to understand that we're in a place that doesn't require us to follow a path, and we don't have a plan, and therefore we should enjoy the plan that we're going to have as much as we can. Like, if you don't want to follow this bell, let's do something else. Mm-hmm. And basically Arthur ends up saying, well, what else are we supposed to do? I don't want to just not stop Cain. And so you see, like, Arthur is just not hearing him. And so that's when John says, we need to slow down, and we need to, like, take time to figure out, like, to spend time with each other or whatever, enjoy each other's company is what he says specifically. And I would argue that this conversation, starting from Arthur's negative reaction to a choice that he's making himself to follow this bell, is like evidence proof
that what John, if you want to say John's asking for anything, it's for Arthur to like what he's doing and to stop doing things he doesn't want to do.
I heard the conversation completely differently. I have a completely different interpretation. That is not
tell me.
That's not how I heard it. What I heard was John continuing to have these moments of recognizing that they aren't necessarily being pushed in the same way that they have been all this time up until now. They're at the end of the line. They're in the dark world. And therefore, because of that, they should really take time to appreciate having that ability to take a moment and to spend time with each other, because I think that John and Arthur both understand what that means. It means times like when they got a haircut and when they were on the train together and were able to have those moments of levity. And I think that John is afraid that if they keep pushing and pushing and pushing and don't take a break to really spend time with each other, that they're not going to get another chance.
I mean, I just can't. I guess because of how John's spoken about the Dark World historically, I cannot fathom that John is really saying we should just sit down and talk.
I'm not saying it's a good idea. I think it's a little stupid to try and have a stop and smell the roses tea party in the Dark World. But I think that in essence, John wants to be able to actually have a moment that isn't full of dread and despair. Which, again, buddy, you're in the wrong place for that.
And how does that make sense when the whole season, at least at minimum this season, John has said nothing but negative, dangerous things about the Dark World? Why do you think he would then say, but actually we should slow down?
But he did say that. I'm not putting words in his mouth.
But you are hearing it. You're hearing it in a very literal way. I'm not hearing it that way. Yeah. I'm hearing like they need to keep moving.
I think that John is avoiding. I think he's being avoidant. And so he's saying things that sound fucking crazy and stupid because he's trying to avoid and he's trying to have this connection with Arthur because he sees Arthur struggling so much.
All right. Well, I think I'm outnumbered, so I'm gonna... Do you want to play the next voice message? I think it's from... It's Autumn, right?
Yes, it's Autumn. Let's do it.
Hey there, Autumn here, and boy, do I have some thoughts and theories. Originally, when hearing BJ's endnote for the chapter, I thought it would be a choice regarding if John lied to Arthur and told him Thoreau wasn't in the Dark World, possibly avoiding Arthur trying to stay in the Dark World to search for her, or if he was honest with Arthur and told him she was, even in spite of how much it would hurt. Because judging from what John has told us of the Dark World, even if he didn't want it to be true, he must dread that Thoreau is there. But surprisingly, people began debating if Thoreau was even in the Dark World at all, and then on the nature of the place itself, which is a subject I'll be discussing over the actual vote. Some wanted to believe that Thoreau wasn't there because, obviously, that would be terrible and unjust. A child so young should not have to experience these horrors. But from this, it seemed as though there was a split consensus on the actual purposes of the Dark World. One was where only those deserving of punishment were trapped and hounded by monsters, tormented adjacent to the depictions of hell in mythologies, which I personally don't think is the case. The moment you suggest there is a better place than the Dark World is the moment you align it with the likes of religion, in the way that there would be a deciding metric for who goes where, what constitutes a person bad enough to be condemned to the Dark World, and who is innocent. And these rules and beliefs are the basis of religion itself. This isn't necessarily a bad thing per se, I just don't think it fits with the Eldritch style of horror Malevolent exhibits.
The only thing I wanted to add is early on when the poll dropped and people were talking about how, we don't think that Arthur's Thoreau is in the Dark World, but there might be alternate versions. I got this crazy idea in my head. I was like, oh my god, what if one of the versions of Thoreau that didn't drown in the bathtub and actually grew to adult age and then got mixed up with eldritch nonsense and she ended up in the Dark World. Oh my god, this is how Thoreau verse could still win. And that took up a majority of my brain power until later in the week.
All right, I think I will play the next one.
Yeah.
Now, make no mistake, I don't want Thoreau to be in the Dark World, but I feel like it's an inevitability. As John said at the very beginning of Malevolent, it's a dumping ground for all timelines. This brings to mind the conversation from part 53, where Arthur asks how they got into the tower, and John replies that maybe we've always been there. These comments suggest that there's no time in the Dark World, that everything in there at this very moment has always and will always be there, as it is outside the timelines. The manager did say that everyone eventually ends up in the Dark World, and I think that's true, because they're already there. So, even if, say, Thoreau didn't immediately go to the Dark World after she died, she would still be there because it's everyone's final destination. Hell, alternate versions of herself, as Arthur brought up as a possibility for himself in a recent chapter, could also be there, because everything in the Dark World is there simultaneously. By this logic, we could also run into characters who haven't died in our timeline, or we may never see any version of them, or Thoreau for that matter, because the Dark World is fucking massive. Infinite, I'd speculate, if it were to house all that has and will ever be. And sure, that may include the worst existence has to offer, but everyone is in the same boat. The Dark World may bring out the worst in people, reduce them to the base instincts or dry husks with its sheer miasma, but the lighter is showing us that they're still people, bad and potentially good. As John said, the Dark World isn't punishment, it just is, which in my opinion is much more existentially terrifying, and makes hope in the face of a universe so uncaring all the more meaningful. But that's just a theory. A malevolent theory. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Autumn, for your submissions. You're so freaking cute, even when I, vehemently disagree with you.
Yeah, and I just want to throw in one more voice from the slow poll chat, where Graham made a really good point that kind of, argues against what you're saying, Autumn. If everything without question ends up in the Dark World, how does that change the context of choices the voters have made in the show? Choosing to free the Wraith wasn't merciful if this is where she's bound to go. Letting Antoine rest wasn't letting him rest at all. He has an eternity of torment ahead of him. What would be the narrative purpose of the entire conversation with Malum if Thoreau had been lost to this bleak mockery of a world potentially for millions of years? And I think that that's an interesting point. It's an interesting counterpoint.
Yeah, I did really like that input from Graham. I want to really briefly, because Autumn did touch on this in the voice message, I went out and, a long time ago, I pulled out all of the mentions of the Dark World, or anytime they talked about the Dark World, basically from the whole of Malevolent before season 6 started. And I went and compiled things that I felt were relevant to this vote as far as definitively who ends up in the Dark World. Basically, in part 2, you have Arthur and John talking about it, and they're talking about how the Dark World is not pile of debris and used tires, it's a place to an end, purgatory. He talks about the fact that it might be crowded, there must be not much room, and John says perhaps, and even then John's saying maybe I was wrong, maybe it's a place for only a certain type of person.
Right,
Arthur
right.
even asks what type was that, and then John says I don't remember.
Yeah.
Then you have in part 15 where Arthur directly asks, does everyone that dies come here? And John says, no, the Dark World. And Arthur says, right. And you're sure they all go there? And John says, no, I'm not. Mm-hmm. And then you have from part 44, where Arthur directly confronts the possibility of Thoreau being in the Dark World, and John does not confirm it. He only tries to offer some kind of solution he can see if Thoreau is in the Dark World.
Right.
So it's been addressed in the show that John does not know.
I think we all got Mandela affected and just were convinced that at some point they said everyone and everything ends up there, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and then we also there's so many other mentions that when John's basically trying to explain the Dark World to him, and when they talk about creatures that come from the Dark World. And then Leigh and I think a couple of other people in the chat, had a really interesting conversation about what the threshold is if we're talking about okay, if not everything comes to the Dark World, how is that determined? How do you decide what goes to the Dark World? And then we got into, well, is it complete chaos where it doesn't really matter? It's just a random selection of people? Is there a sorted into heaven and hell type Christian sort of order thing? Probably not. Is that, and so the truth is nobody has any clue. Yeah. And I think that's a large part of the point of the poll, is that John doesn't know this answer, Arthur doesn't know this answer, and we don't know this answer. And so either answer can be true, and you can see either answer as a lie. So
right.
I think...
And either answer could be a lie.
Right.
We don't get to pick the intention. Despite what Booth John, or whoever he is, at the end said about whether or not we would be, giving hope, He also didn't specify, like, which way would that hope go necessarily. Like, is it more hopeful to think that Faro's in the dark world? Or is it more hopeful to think that she's not in the dark world?
Right. And that is like a huge portion of this debate beyond just like what John's intentions were and like what, how you read the chapter and all of this stuff is because there's so much about this vote that is not explicitly clear in the text. And we have years of transcript to look back on, but really, like, strategically, not much has been said definitively about the dark world.
Well, not only that, but also a lot of the stuff that John said early on about the dark world, that dude was lying out his fucking ass about fucking everything. So God knows how honest, or if he was trying to be manipulative somehow, or conveniently forgetting things or conveniently remembering things that aren't actually true, and blah 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 blah.
And the amount of times he doubles back and is like, no, I have actually no fucking clue, or maybe, or like he just straight up admits that he doesn't really know. And so I mean, I don't know.
He's an unreliable narrator.
You cannot definitively say that either one is a lie. But that is the perspective you can choose to vote with, is like, is this going to be a lie either way? Or what would be more painful either way? It just kind of depends. So that being said, I know we have another submission, but this one is not a voice submission. How do you think we should present this?
You put it on screen, right?
Yeah.
Make sure everybody looks at it. And do you want to read it, or do you want me to read it?
I'll read it. Yeah, I'll read it. Okay. All right. This is from Discord user Milk. And it's a PDF. I'm just going to tell you guys right now. It's a PDF if you're listening without visuals, with increasing text sizes, bold, sometimes caps, very little use of like spacing, and some punctuation. So with that ambiance set for those listening at home, I'm going to do my best to try and read this with the emphasis that comes to me naturally. I can't say this is going to be Milk's ideal reading. Definitely probably isn't, because I'm on the opposite side of Milk, and I think Milk is legitimately getting so angry at me in chat today, but I will do my best. Okay. Hello, Autopsy. It me, Milk. They, them pronouns. This week I voted for Bubbles. I'm choosing to believe that Faro is in the dark world. I'm getting straight to business. I'm going to throw John a little bit under the bus here, all right? Sorry, Pookie. We were only able to recognize Frederick because Marie has shown them a photograph of them. John has never seen what Faro looks like, and Arthur, when... Sorry. Okay, hold on. This is legitimately how it's written, so, like, if I fuck up, this is how it is. John has never seen what Faro looks like, and Arthur, when bringing her up, has only brought up the way she acts, but no descriptors of how she looked aside from little and small, which, hey, all kids are little and small. We do get to see a picture of Faro in season 4, but that was after John came back to Arthur, so he couldn't have known. So I'm just saying, you can't really confirm she's not there when you didn't know how she looks like to begin with, aside from the factors of... small girl, maybe looks like blind, idiot I'm possessing, really hoping she's got his genes so it's easier for me. And another thing, throughout this whole series, we can see that Faro is just such a driving force for Arthur. In The Fire, part 45, Malum himself literally says she is the spark within every firelight that Arthur creates and torch he carries. If we tell him no, she's not there, we're literally just stomping on and blowing out Arthur Lester's already small flame in his heart that's already struggling to keep going. We're also only on episode 2 of the new season. I just don't think letting go this early on is a good idea, especially when our adventure has just started in the dark world. Yes, the manager told us we have to let go, but he also told us to keep the fucking lighter close, and I'm just saying the lighter isn't the only thing providing light. And sanity points, Faro Lester is literally partially responsible for Arthur Lester's sanity bar and small remains of hopefulness he has in his sad, sad little life. I'm just saying, aside from Frederick, everything else has just been getting us used to the dark world and environment and creatures. Shit has not hit the fan yet, and if we let go now, he won't have anything else to hold on to when Arthur is in an all-time low. So, anyways, this is the hill I die on, the end. As you can see, this is clearly written by an Arthur stan, unlike some people in the audience. Tisk tisk. I love you, Autopsy. Oh my god, Queen Highball. Thank you for your submission, Milk.
Incredible performance, Queen. Incredible. That was wonderful. And thank you, Milk, for sending in your unfiltered essence in text form.
I loved it. Beautiful, A plus, gorgeous. I mean, that's a choice as an argument. That's something you could decide. I think it's pretty silly to think that John, like, wouldn't know that the child in front of him is Faro for the sake of a story. But I can kind of see where you're talking about, like, oh, we've never described Faro's appearance, so
Right.
maybe John wouldn't know what she looks like. But, like, I don't know, because I feel like if...
I also saw someone saying, I don't remember if it was Milk or somebody else, but someone said, what if the photograph of Faro that they found at Daniel's house was actually a photograph of Bella as a child?
I can't.
Maybe.
I'm sorry. I just don't buy it. Guys,
No.
it's Faro,
It's
and
interesting.
there's nothing you can really
It's
say to throw
interesting.
me off that. Because, like, I think it would be absolutely ludicrous for the plot twist of Malevolent to be they accidentally picked up a picture of his wife instead of his daughter.
Who also would look a lot like his daughter when she was a child because she's her fucking mom, so...
Even if it is Bella, it doesn't change, like, the point, which is the fact that he thought it was Art Faro anyway. And
Yeah.
anyway, the point is, I think that if they meet a little girl in the dark world, I'm pretty sure they're going to know if it's Faro or not.
Yeah.
And I don't think it needs to make sense for it to be true.
Yeah.
That's kind of always been one of the key cornerstones of Malevolent. Doesn't always need to make sense for it to be
Nope.
true. So I will say that I think there's a lot of interpretations you can make about this
Yeah.
chapter. I think that a lot of the different opinions that people have of, like, the beats of this chapter, for example, like, John, I was about to call you John, Vol.
Aw, I'm flattered, I think.
Oh my god. Oh no, don't be, because I was just about to say, like, Vol sees John as incredibly stupid, who would just, like, turn around and be like, oh, I know I've been talking shit about the dark world, but I think actually it's fine to just sit down and hang out. And, like, you know, Vol can read it that way. I can read John as being
I didn't call him
clearly
stupid,
intelligent.
did I?
And I think that, in general, this vote is so up to interpretation
Yeah.
because there's really not going to be a lot of votes that you can throw into this season that is probably very strongly, like, pathed out already. I'm not saying that everything's planned, but I do think that there is an ending to Malevolent already. I don't necessarily think a lot of this is flexible, and so, like, I am sure we're getting to a point where the votes have to be way more esoteric and, like, philosophical than
And
anything,
kind of up
which
for
is kind of...
interpretation for Harlan to play with.
Yeah. And I really like it. And I think that either way the vote goes, which, I mean, I'm winning so far and I don't plan on stepping down, and when I fight hard I usually get my way, so
You specifically
kinda
are
control
winning.
the
Not just
polls.
the not
No
just
big
the
deal.
side of the poll that you're on, but you, Queen, are specifically winning this week's vote on Malevolent. I'm so proud of you. You know what? Honestly, you deserve it. You deserve it.
Well, I just, you know what, I think it's just it's hard because I fully am willing to accept that I think a lot of my strong feelings about this vote are coming in strong reaction to other people's interpretation of the chapter that I don't agree on. Like, I really feel for Arthur in all of the situations he's in, and I'm more emotionally like John, but I'm way more sympathetic to Arthur. And that's really what paints a lot of my decisions, because I may be a very tender person who wants to slow down and everything, but in reality, I'd definitely be telling John to shut the fuck up. Like, cool, I love you too, homie, but, like, I'm focused on the end of the world, and you're not the one moving the legs. So if you want to have this heart-to-heart, like, either have it with yourself or wait for me to be ready.
Math it out yourself for a while.
Math it out yourself for a while. Yeah, I love that. And I'm glad Arthur got to be like, I don't know, I'm kind of happy that Arthur got a time to be like, John,
This is not the time. This is not
especially
the time.
because they just came off the eulogy, which was a time for them to stop and slow down and talk. Like,
that's true.
Arthur straight up
That's
said,
true.
it's not about me right now. He just had what he wanted, and now he's standing here asking for more? Like, come on, man. I gotta keep moving. We're dying. The world's ending. My daughter's dead. I've lost everything. I just got blown to pieces. come the fuck on. Like, and meanwhile, I can see how John is like scared and isolated and desperate for connection. And he's thinking, this is it. Like, I don't even have a body with which to choose to spend the last of my time. Like, I don't have anything but Arthur. And Arthur has a goal right now to work toward. And my goal is Arthur. And that's the difference, is John has become a goal for Arthur, but Arthur has not acknowledged that yet. And in a way that he chooses when he's ready to acknowledge that John is a goal, right?
Yeah.
Because we saw him pick John over and over again. But when he is not in a life or death situation where Faroe is not in his mind, that is like, John is the default because he can't get Faroe, right?
Well, like, you know, we've had a lot of conversations about how emotionally repressed Arthur is, despite how many gestures he has made towards John to let him know how he cares about him. There's still something kind of holding him back from fully embracing that all the time. And I think part of that is because he struggles to accept that kind of love as well.
I agree. And I think the version of events where we say that John is trying to say, like, you would do it for Faroe, but not for me, it's typically phrased in a way that makes me very defensive of Arthur, because defensive of Arthur and also defensive of the concept of their relationship, because to me it feels like John is, I don't want to think that he's trying to say that Arthur should value him as much as he valued Faroe. I don't want to think that that's what John is saying.
I don't think that that's what he's saying either. Like, I don't buy into the reading that John is bringing up Faroe because she has a physical form and he wishes that he had a physical form. No, I think that he is purely trying to sort of like shake Arthur up and make him consider whether he would do that for someone else, specifically someone that he cares about, like Faroe, but not that I don't think that he's jealous of Faroe.
I think it's hard for me to accept, or maybe I just don't like the idea of John making it personal for him. Like, I know it is personal what he's asking for, because he wants that personal connection with Arthur, but I think it's really hard for me to swallow that John would say, like, you would do it for somebody else, but why not for me? Because to me, that is so, I don't know, it feels unearned from John. I think
To me, that's so John. It fits within his character, I think.
Maybe it's just because I feel like they've had so many moments where I feel it should be affirmed for John already, that it doesn't feel right for him to keep asking. But that is so true to life. People who are insecure, me included, are always continuing to ask, you still love me, right? We're still good, right? You're not mad at me, right? So that's a very true character trait, and I think I'm just really reluctant to hear John say it now with something so sensitive and with something that makes him sound like it's such a low blow in a way that I don't want to imagine that he does anymore. And maybe that's, I'm willing to accept that maybe it's just a backslide again, but I don't know. I wish that I hope that it's something that is a little bit more like he was using it as an example to get Arthur's attention in a way that he clearly did. He succeeded at what he was trying to do, more or less. It's just that then Arthur was like, oh, what, shiny thing over here, and then, in the way of me having to confront anything about how I feel about John. Like,
and I think that it'll be really interesting next week to see if we get sort of clarity on what John's intention was.
Yeah.
I just wanted to close out this week's episode with a little special something that we sometimes get in the slow poll, sometimes not. But longtime fan of all of the Guthrie's work, Marvin, occasionally writes some very interesting poetry and shares it on the server. Sometimes it's very, very silly. Other times it's very heartfelt. And his poem this week was really lovely, so I wanted to share it. His poem goes, "He wrote a song for her, his greatest work. But fathers should sing when their children live. The dead don't need no lullabies. In olden times, babes did not go to heaven if they were not baptized. I'm pretty sure bathwater don't count. It don't make it holy coming out of the spout. And if she is in the dark world, so what? You cannot turn back the clock. There is no zip, you can do for her. Arthur Lester, art her lest here? Cannot she even rest here?"
Yikes, Marvin.
He's He's an interesting guy. He's an interesting guy.
Oh, he writes some incredible poetry, and he's such a cool person.
Yeah.
I have plans and designs. So
Oh,
plans and
interesting.
designs.
Okay.
All right, gang. I know this was a heated episode. Thank you for dealing with me shouting a lot. Part of that is Milk's fault, though, so you can blame Milk for that one.
Yeah. Go at Milk about that.
Yes, and Vol, thank you for being such a spirited debate partner.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. You won't have to deal with this again next week because next week is I hate to tell you this, but next week's a no vote week.
That hurt.
I'm sorry.
Okay, fine.
I'm sorry.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, of course, to Harlan Guthrie, the sole creator of Malevolent. Without his labor of love for a story he wants to tell, we wouldn't be here. To join the live recording, submit your own message, get in touch with me, and more, visit linktree/Malevolent Autopsy. The official Invictus Discord server is open to the public and includes a channel just for Malevolent Autopsy fans. We also have our own private, patrons-only channel. Finally, thank you to Mizra, Nikki, Vol Control, and everyone who has helped create and maintain Malevolent Autopsy. These friends are also volunteers who donate time and energy to help put together this love letter to Malevolent. The horrors persist,
But so do we.